What up? Welcome to the conversation. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richey. We have an interesting show because we have an interesting fella, all right? Dominic Izzo, retired police officer, 16-year veteran, also radio show host, former QAnon guy, and a lot of other things. So we're gonna talk about what he believes about police bias, Black Lives Matter, and if we get to it, we'll throw in reparations for good measure, since he likes to go on rants about why reparations is not a good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Dominic Izzo.
Doc, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well, brother. Let me say this, man. So obviously I've looked at some of your past rants and some of the statements that you've made, and amazingly, I actually agreed with one thing you said. And you have this capability to say very smart things in a sentence where you also say something very dumb, in my estimation. So let me bring that to the forefront. You said that there's systemic bias and racism inside of the criminal justice system. The emphasis should be placed on judges and prosecutors and deal makers and prisons, which you and I completely 100% agree with that assessment. But then in that same dialogue, in that interview, you created a caveat for law enforcement to say that somehow they're not included in that systemic bias against people of color, and they should not be treated the same because they are simply enforcing the laws. I want you to unpack that, and we'll get into it.
No, I don't believe my exact words were that they shouldn't be treated the same. There's always got to be accountability, 100%. I do want to start at the top, up at the top, and say that if people really did dissect and look into areas like Chicago, Cook County, Illinois, that's where I'm from. We do have systemic racism. I don't care who says what, it's in the jail. You've got a jail that houses 10,000 men and women, and we have a majority of Black men and women in there. Why? And I broke it down the last time, which was it's a profit system. You know, I truly do believe, and now remember, anytime I talk, I'm gonna put an idealistic point of view out there first, and then I try to sit there and support, with time being permitted, my reasons behind I'm saying that. But I mean, I do believe certain things are stupid. Like I'm not a fan of the war on drugs. In the beginning of my career, oh my gosh, demonized drugs like crazy, and I'm sure I ruined countless lives by arresting people that had weed in their pocket, right? You have things like that. And the connection between law enforcement and the courts is, well, here we have the laws in the books, and we'll take cannabis for a second. Cannabis, it's illegal. And again, I'm dating myself because I believe in 2017 or 2018 in Illinois, they changed the legality of it. But back then when I was doing it, you had the easiest reason to arrest a Black man or woman, right? It's a victimless crime as far as I'm concerned. Somebody wants to smoke a joint and get high, I don't care. That's perfectly on them. But it was a great reason to find your probable cause to stop somebody. Easy arrest. If you're in a municipality where you've got a village ordinance law, well then you got a $75 to $125 ticket. So you're taxing them right there on the street. Give me your money, or you're throwing them in prison or jail, excuse me, because it's not prison, for 2 weeks before their court date. So I think that the way that law enforcement is the cop goes into the academy, and yes, there is a lot of demonizing of the Black community through the laws that they are enforcing. That's how I think that the police.
Let me opine on that point. Not just through the laws, because what you just described is also a level of discretion. Remember, these laws are enforceable, or they are non-enforceable, or you have what's called prosecutorial discretion. Now, a lot of people think, Dominic, that prosecutorial discretion starts with the prosecutor. No. Prosecutorial discretion starts with the responding officer. And that responding officer has the discretion to say, we want to enforce these minor laws. We want to enforce this victimless crime or not. And let me read some statistics, brother, and I'm gonna have you respond to it, because the only issue I had with your previous statement from an interview that you did was the fact that you provided some protection for members of law enforcement. You did talk about the sheriff's office. You talked about the prison industrial complex without saying it that way. But how did they get to the prison, brother? What's the first response? What's the first interaction?
That's well, your statistics, Doc, I don't want to interrupt you, but your statistics, I'm not going to argue your statistics, but here's the deal. This is what you do have to remember too. Now those cops have discretion, right? But this is where I blame the public, because the public likes to sit there and elect a mayor. The mayor appoints a police chief. You got your department policies that are written, and then it's upheld by the cops. What about your department performance evaluations? What about your quotas? No one in their village.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. So, Izzo, let me go ahead and get into some of the stats. October 19th. So I'm going to start with a recent stat. Los Angeles Times found that during traffic stops, 24% of black drivers and passengers were searched compared to 16% of Latinos, 5% of whites. That same study, Izzo, found that police were slightly more likely to find drugs, weapons, and other contraband on whites that were stopped, not on blacks or Latinos. Also, Cincinnati, 2019, another study found that black motorists were 30% more likely to be pulled over than a white motorist. Black motorists also comprised of 76%
Gotta break
of
that
the arrests. Hold on, of the arrests following the traffic stops, despite making only 43% of the city's population. Let me go to your neck of the woods, Chicago. In 2016, the Police Accountability Task Force reported that in Chicago, black and Hispanic drivers were searched approximately 4 times more often than white drivers. Yet, in the Chicago Police Department's own numbers in their self-evaluation, their data found that contraband was more likely to be found, twice as likely to be found on white drivers, even though their systems or their methods did not reflect the reality of criminality in those stops. They still decided to target more blacks than whites. That's in your backyard. My question to you is, do you not find it legitimate that systemic racism and prejudice also exist in law enforcement, the responding officer, members who were part of your previous profession?
No, because I know no one wants to talk about the concept of culture and behavior, culture and crime, right? So all those traffic stops that you wind up reading statistics on, why is no one talking about, you got it on paper, but what was the stop like? I'm gonna tell you flat out, what was the reasonable suspicion that the police officer had to ask, do you mind if I search the vehicle? And then how often? It's not like a cop can arbitrarily search a car. You have to have probable cause. You can ask anytime you want, but do those statistics say whether or not that the blacks and the Hispanics versus the whites gave the cops consent to search the car versus the whites?
So let me get this right, Izzo. You're saying that there's systemic racism and prejudice in every other level of criminal justice, the courts, the prosecutor, the jails, but there's no systemic racism codified in those who actually are administrators of justice as law enforcement agents. That's what you're saying?
I never got that far because you never.
Okay, but you do agree that systemic racism exists in all of these other forms of criminal justice systems, right?
I said that last time, 100%, and I'm going to continue.
Okay, but you don't believe it exists with cops?
No, I actually believe that behavior, what the cops are going to see, what you don't see in a report, actually dictates about 90% of what they're doing, which affords.
Well, where do you get that from?
Which affords people, because I did the job for almost 2 decades.
Okay, you did the job in Chicago. Did you ever target someone because they were black?
Did I ever? No, why would I?
Okay, did you ever notice a cop that you work with call any black person the N-word or target people because they were black?
Nope.
All right, according to Chicago's own report in 2016, cops in Chicago were doing that.
Okay. You got to let me finish on these statements. I mean, I appreciate all the passion. There's a problem in law enforcement. There is, and it all boils down to what they're able to enforce. One of my biggest standings is if you want to fix the relationship between the police and the public, you go back to the Constitution. I keep talking about those.
Wait a minute, come on, brother. Go back to the Constitution.
Doc, you got to keep interrupting me, man. I'm gonna lose track of
man, okay. Tell me where in the Constitution. We only got 20 minutes.
If you want people to start living and not being raped by the police and the public and the courts for all this money, then go back to the Constitution. Stop arresting for some of these victimless crimes. That's my first concept on that.
But see, we agree on that.
Well, we're off to a good start so far.
but we disagree that somehow police officers are not also subject to the same systemic biases and racism as any other level of law enforcement.
It sounds like for everybody's need who wants to crucify the cops without looking at it.
No, we crucify bad cops, brother.
Of course cops. And if you notice, if you ever seen my content, you'll know that I'm one of the ones who's chastising law enforcement for crucifying bad cops. The point being is, you're looking, it's what are you giving the police the authority to do? So that's what you have to look at when I go back to the Constitution. When you start taking away Terry stop and frisk stuff, you're going to see a decrease in police interactions. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm saying that you give the police officers the authority to enforce laws. That's their job, right? Law enforcement. Yes, we do know that we're going to stretch that, because I'll tell you, I'm very public about it too. The best job about the police and the narrative and the aftermath of writing the report is you take the evidence and you fit that narrative to your report, right? So it sticks better. But that's such a rarity in the instance of what really happens. Like I keep saying, if we go back to that one statistics, because everyone likes to throw that out there. Well, you got 10 black guys were stopped and they were searched. You got 10 white guys, 2 were searched. Well, maybe the 10 black guys didn't know they could look at the cop and say, no, you don't have permission to search my car. And maybe the white guys, they actually said, no, sorry, you can't search my car.
Well, the problem with your assessment, and Izzo, I hate to interrupt, man, but we got to have a discussion about it. The problem with your assessment is that you're not taking into account the fact that the data I just read to you also showed that even though blacks were less likely to have any weapons, any contraband, or any drugs, they were still more likely to be targeted and searched than whites. Meaning, if you're talking about a pure law enforcement standpoint, whites are more likely to get away with crimes because they are the ones less likely to be targeted by police officers. As I said before, brother, my only beef with you is the fact that you can call out the prosecutor, biased judges, the prison industrial complex, but you have this blind spot as it relates to police officers who are the first agents who administer justice in that entire equation that you laid out. How can they not be part of the systemic bias, but every other level of the criminal justice system is part of the systemic bias that you oppose?
Is it safe to say that the police officers are going to be the ones who have the first contact with the subjects on the street?
No, it's sick to say that they're not also subject to the same biases that any other level of criminal justice is subject to.
Well, let's back up for a second. The police officers are going to be the first one to have contact with the people on the street. And a lot of times, if you work in the same neighborhood for 10, 15, 20 years, you know the same people who are regulars, you know the problems. So there are going to be instances where you do know that you arrested John Doe, who's a black male, 5 times walking down the street because he had something illegal in him. It's probably a safe bet that if you wind up contacting him, searching him, and asking for permission to search, he's going to have something on him again for the 10th time.
Come on, man, that's a ridiculous assessment. You're using a microcosm to explain a macrocosm. How many policing in the United States of America?
How many years were you a police officer?
Well, let me talk about your
years were you a police officer?
Let me talk about man, I'm not the popo, brother.
Were you?
So let me talk about your years as a cop.
My expertise as the.
Yeah, let's talk about your years as a cop. You were there for 16 years, and you admitted that you arrested people for dumb stuff, correct?
Absolutely, in my opinion, yes. Some of the stuff,
right? So you were a perpetrator of an antithetical reality for law enforcement. You were not the guy administering justice, you were administering arrest, correct?
Documenting behavior and actions, correct.
Okay, and you regret those actions today, I assume?
Personally, sure.
All right, 16 years you were a cop. In those 16 years, you're telling me that you never saw bias inside of law enforcement against people of color?
No, I never did, because we knew that we were under a microscope all the time. And I dealt with blacks, Hispanics, Asians, whites, you name it. It was not something that you saw anywhere. I'm sorry.
So you were a Chicago cop, but your own Chicago police.
I was a Northwest suburban cop. I was caught between Milwaukee and Chicago. So a lot of the element that they chased out, we got.
So in that same region, they have released data from 2016 to 2019 saying that cops on their police forces in that area targeted black and brown people. Are you saying that those cops or those executives
that actually says that they targeted, or is that what you're translating?
No, sir. It's in the 2016 Police Accountability Task Force report, and I'll send it to you after the show.
No, that's right.
So it's saying that they targeted black and brown people.
So police officers, they're saying that police officers admitted that they targeted black and brown people?
No, the data shows they targeted black and brown people.
Okay, so that's how you're translating it.
Well, the data shows that they targeted black and brown people. Those are facts.
That's how you're translating it, right? Is it a possibility that in that region that black and brown people committed more crimes than whites or Asians?
But that's according to the data. See, I'm glad you brought that up.
How were you translating the data?
Hold on, Izzo, that's possible, except for the fact that the data that actually has codified their criminal history background says no, they did not commit more criminality than white people. They were not found to have more contraband. They were found to have less contraband, and they were found to have less weapons. They were found to have less drugs. That's what the study says.
What crimes are we comparing in that study?
We're comparing contraband, drugs.
Okay, those are not going to be initial context. Those are going to be a result of the stop. What is the reason that the police officer stopped them for in the first place?
Well, according to the study, they targeted it. Now, Izzo, I get it, brother. You represent law enforcement.
You gotta explain that.
Let me say this to you, man, because I get what you're trying to do.
Irresponsible and leave your audience out there.
But think about how logical this sounds.
Contact with the first place.
Izzo, think about how logical this sounds. Just give me a moment, man. Give me a moment.
Please do.
You believe that judges engage in systemic racism against black people? Yes or no?
I do. Yes, I do.
You believe that sheriffs or jails and prisons engage in systemic bias against black and brown people?
No, the operators of, not the correctional officers.
Okay, but the system itself.
Yeah, the system. I said it the last time too. Is you have a housing facility that's going to need, if you're a vendor of shirts and uniforms and food, you're going to need those vendor supplies utilized. So you have to have bodies in the jail. I keep saying that the laws that are on the books are easily designed to wind up keeping the black people in prison.
You believe prosecutors, who could also argue that they're simply following the law. You believe prosecutors are also part of systemic racism against black and brown people, correct?
You not pay attention to Kim Fox in the Chicago area?
Brother, that's a yes or a no. Do you believe that or not?
I believe that there's something abhorrently wrong with the prosecutorial system.
And you believe everything is righteous with the police officers in the process of criminal justice?
I believe for the most part, 100%.
Okay.
Didn't come back.
Listen, I'm going to let your point stand, brother. It's silly as hell to me that you have that blind spot because you seem to be a smarter guy than that.
You talk a lot, but you don't let me get too much out, do you?
Well, you got enough out, man. I just wanted to make sure I made that point clear.
I still want to know where the whites versus the blacks are coming in, what their initial stops are, because you can't say.
Yeah, I'll send you the data, brother.
But you can't expect anyone else.
You have your point.
You
have your point of view on that.
I'm going to
move on. I only have a few minutes, brother.
Got drugs.
Okay, that's fine. We got a few minutes.
Go ahead.
Let me read something because I found this really interesting and I want to hit all these points. Your bio says, and this is what you represent to people. Your bio says it is Izzo's goal to bridge the gap between the police and the public through education, empowerment, and respect. Do you stand by that in your bio?
Certainly do.
Okay, let me read something to you. I'm gonna read two things to you. I want you to remember the respect part. You tweeted, "I'm for starting a movement of torching the F out of all BLM Black Lives Matter flag. But that would be a waste of money. So instead, I just ordered my first Black Lives Matter flag and will be vlogging and documenting when I use it to pick up my dog's ish each time he goes. Makes me wish I had a horse now."
100%.
Now, once again, your bio says your goal is to bridge the gap between the police and the public through education, empowerment, and respect. Do you find that comment to be respected?
No, there's no respect for Black Lives Matter in that. I don't respect Black Lives Matter.
Now, do you believe that members of Black Lives Matter are American citizens?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe that members of QAnon are American citizens, a group you used to be a member of?
I was never a member of them, but yes, I do.
Okay. Have you said anything as grotesque against members of QAnon?
I'm sure I have. You'd have to dig back in my social media.
Well, tell me.
Tell you what I have said
about QAnon.
Well, I can't recall off the bat. You'd have to go through my social media as thorough as you did to find that selective statement.
Okay. Let me go through another one then. Why? Yeah. You said that the Black National Anthem is racist and offensive.
Yeah, 100%.
Let me finish the quote. "If I ever hear it in public, I'm going to return the favor and talk loudly over it like some folk do in movie theaters."
100%.
Okay. What's racist about the Black National Anthem, lift every voice and sing? What's racist about it?
What do we need segregation for? I thought the black community was against segregation.
What's racist, sir, about the song?
Segregation is racist. Segregation is racist.
The author,
Doc,
segregation, first of all,
is this a dialogue or is this a monologue? Is this a monologue or dialogue?
Sure it is. But answer the question, what's racist about the song itself?
Segregation. It's segregation. You are segregating a people. But again, too, that's what liberal whites and liberal black loves to do. They love to wind up keeping people separate and they wind up furthering their own agenda. If you can't see the difference or the issue with instead of uniting a people, but we have to have division, you're by definition putting your voices above other people.
Do you understand? Let me explain to you, brother, because I think you can get this. The national anthem that was adopted, I think, in 1931 fully, written in 1814. The national anthem actually has elements of racism inside of the lyrics.
I'm sure, Doc, if you found everything, if you searched everything, you would find something that would offend somebody. If we're gonna take our time,
but Izzo, that's the real point.
If we're gonna spend another generation taking down every movie and statue and cancel,
but nobody's taking down the national anthem. It's a great thing that black people have a song that they can be proud of as well, rather than singing a song that's racist against black people.
Why shouldn't collectively all come together and then edit it and take a vote from whites, blacks, Hispanics, all Americans to find out what they think is racist?
Brother, it's been real, man. I appreciate your time, all right?
Thanks, Doc. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, thank you.